Shalem and welcome to Jerusalem Studio. Israel is seemingly struggling to contain the spread of the coronavirus pandemic as the number of confirmed cases steadily rises, already mounting to some thousands of affected Israelis. How is the government in Jerusalem dealing with this contagion spread, and to what degree is the Israeli public adherent to the unprecedented yet necessary measures? To discuss this complex issue, we're joined in the studio by our TV7 analyst, Mr. Amir Oren. Welcome. Hello. I'd like also to welcome, and joining us from Central Israel is Dr. Eran Lerman, who is the Vice President of the Jerusalem Institute for Strategy and Security and a lecturer at Shalem College. Welcome.
Good to be with you.
And joining us from the police headquarters in the country's capital is Israeli police spokesperson, Superintendent Micky Rosenfeld. Thank you for being with us, Micky.
Thank you very much.
I'd like to refer the first question to you, Mr. Oren. We're currently, of course, operating in a new environment due to this contagion spread, following up on the measures enacted by the Israeli government where public distancing is crucial in order to contain this virus from spreading further. To what degree is the situation dire currently in Israel in comparison also to other European and other countries around the world?
There is a lack of information. The public is quite confused, even though it is bombarded by, or perhaps because it is bombarded by various experts, officials, and government ministers. Now, Prime Minister Netanyahu has fought 3 re-election campaigns over the last year or so. And one of his standard lines was that he's in a unique league with other world leaders. So earlier this week, this came true in an unexpected way when he himself has been quarantined, much like Prime Minister Boris Johnson, Chancellor Angela Merkel, or Canadian leader Justin Trudeau. Now, this is not life-threatening by any measure, but it was reflective of the reality where everybody could find themselves all of a sudden testing positive, perhaps having only a mild case and recovering, but you never know. So now, as for the question of the public's obedience or adherence to the regulations, when one walks the streets and roads of Israel, both in the cities as well as the inter-urban highways, one sees quite a good degree of understanding by the public that staying home for a couple of weeks is possibly the best measure of having the virus either breed or go away. And the most important idea is, for one, not to infect others, rather than for one not being infected oneself, because statistically this would be a lesser proposition. All in all, and obviously Superintendent Rosenfeld could shed more light on it later, except for certain communities or certain locations, such as an old folks' home in Jerusalem or elsewhere, where there are concentrations of people who may be more vulnerable and may congregate in a way which contradicts regulations. It seems as if the Israeli public well understands its duty.
Dr. Lerman, I would like to refer the next question to you. The National Security Advisor of Israel, Meir Ben-Shabbat, stated a few certain things that I had some questions about. You, as the former Deputy National Security Advisor, may shed light on this. Currently, according to Ben-Shabbat, there is not enough information in order to know where Israel is heading to from this stage, and it seems like Jerusalem authorities are somewhat gambling with the situation based on partial data because of a lack of testings of the general public. To what is this degree is this accurate, and how is the operational conduct actually influencing, based on the data accumulated, the future steps of Israel with regard to stemming this contagion from spreading further?
Well, the honest truth, to the best of my understanding, is that the information is lacking everywhere. Nobody knows how fast exactly this is spreading. In different countries, we've had different patterns. Nobody knows how long the time in which people are actually contagious continues. There's not even no certainty that people who have recovered will not get it again. The number of unknowns has less to do with the lack of testing and more to do with the universal problems that you hear from every country contending with this virus about certain basic assumptions. So the government in Israel, as opposed to some other governments worldwide, has essentially taken the more pessimistic assumptions as a point of departure. It's true that testing is not yet up to speed because of lack of equipment and failure to prepare properly. And this will be the subject of future commissions of inquiry, I assume. But the lack of information is not necessarily the result of this failure as much as it is part of a broader pattern everywhere, that we don't know enough about the nature of COVID-19 to make certain decisions. And therefore, people decide based essentially on their hunches whether they take the risk of doing too much or take the risk of doing too little. So far, I would say that the Israeli results, with 15 or 16 dead and growing, but still the numbers of dead are nowhere near what has befallen some other countries. We are closer to the German pattern than that of other afflicted countries. If it can be kept at this level, it would prove the actions of the government right at the end of the day.
Indeed. Moving to you, Israeli spokesperson Micky Rosenfeld, to what degree are the directives by the government clear with regard to the measures undertaken, and are the people throughout Israel, being such a diverse society, adherent to measures that are not always understood by the public themselves?
Well, every decision and every step that is being taken and implemented on the ground, both by the Israeli police as well as the Ministry of Health, are absolutely vital. And the message to the public is to stay at home. And we know that the public, as we've seen over the last, in fact, 2 weeks, 90% of the public are clearly listening and understanding and implementing what is going on and what is happening on the ground. Where we are having difficulties, and we've seen that over the last 48 hours, over the weekend here in Israel, are in two different parts of the country, both in Jerusalem as well as in the area of Bnei Brak. We've had to analyze what is necessary on the ground. We've had to try and understand what needs to be implemented directly with the leaders of the communities. And that means, of course, speaking directly to the rabbis, getting the message out that people have to stay at home, because there's been an immense increase in the numbers of people that have been unfortunately confirmed positive with the virus within the ultra-religious communities, the Haredi community. And we're doing everything possible at the moment in order to try and make sure that we are at the right place at the right time. The message to the public, especially in those communities as of this morning and as of yesterday night, is to make sure that you keep a distance between one another. I can also confirm, and just to tell everybody who is listening and understanding what is going on, even the head police officer of Bnei Brak, who is in charge of the whole city, was confirmed positive with the virus. So we know the virus is there, and we're doing everything we can at the moment, both on the ground as well as helicopter units that are also patrolling over different cities of the country, dispersing people, getting the message out as we're talking.
I'd like to ask you another question, Mr. Rosenfeld. When we're talking specifically about the police efforts, we see, of course, a lot of images from police officers in protective gear with face masks and so on. But there's been reports about a lack of those kind of protective gear. To what degree is the police capable of protecting itself, considering the fact that you're in the forefront dealing with the communities at hand?
That's absolutely correct. The police units are on the front line. The police units that are patrolling the streets and have set up roadblocks are making contact with the public. The idea and the philosophy is to make sure that the message to the public is stay at home, stay away, be as safe as possible for as long as necessary based on the government decision and the new orders. Our officers are fully protected. We're wearing gloves, we're wearing masks, and every contact that we have with the public is in order to make sure that we are safe and also the public is safe as much as possible.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, I'd like to ask you the follow-up question. We had reports about the Mossad, intelligence agency of Israel, going out on an operation as part of Israeli efforts, which Prime Minister Netanyahu has already said in some of his statements, that certain headquarters was established in order to try and acquire, procure, to be more accurate, medical equipment, tools to protect both the medical staff as well as law enforcement. To what degree is the Mossad operation successful in acquiring? We hear about hundreds of thousands of equipment, but is it really providing the answer to the challenges at hand?
Well, isn't it ironic that the Mossad, Israel's much vaunted intelligence and special operations agency, rather than pilfer atomic secrets out of Tehran or send hit squads elsewhere, is now involved in trying to get some friendly officials in some countries who do not have diplomatic relations with Israel, provide Israel with the much sought after equipment, because everybody needs it. A friend of mine spoke to his Japanese contacts a couple of days ago, trying to order some ventilators from Japan. And they laughed at his request. They said, well, first of all, the Americans have the right of first refusal because of our relationship with them, defense relationship, but also every other country comes to Japan as to any other place. So if the Mossad has some contacts in some palace or government where they can get some much needed equipment, more power to it. But the problem is that Israel was forewarned for many years that there is a shortage of critical equipment, but the government decided that its priorities lie elsewhere, and it did not prepare itself. Eran Lerman referred earlier to a possible commission of inquiry when it is all over. And also, even as late as January 20th, when it was obvious that there is a crisis, they did not try to get any ventilator. And obviously, the ventilators are the most crucial link in the chain, because people with respiratory problems are going to deluge the hospitals all at once. Right now, we are far from this point, and we may never get there. But if we do, we are going to have a lot of problems. One other point, Micky Rosenfeld is part of the national police. And this is a very good part of Israel's system of government, because it is all centrally orchestrated, rather than as it is in federated countries such as the United States or Germany, where you have the capital and you have the local authorities, states, districts, provinces, what have you. However, in the central government of Israel, there is a tug of war between the health ministry and the Ministry of Defense regarding who is going to do what. And up to now, the health ministry came up short, and probably it is going to be transferred to the Ministry of Defense.
Dr. Lerman, would you like to contribute to this topic?
Look, on the story of the Mossad is perhaps part of an attempt to emphasize Israel's emerging relations with countries in the Gulf, in particular, with which Israel does not have formal relations. So the Mossad basically acts here as a surrogate foreign ministry. There's not much more to it than that, beyond a certain tendency of the Mossad in recent years to be a bit more overt about its achievements. The larger story, of course, has to do with the need to keep abreast of the projected numbers, and we're going into a very tight race between the rate of infection and the rate of acquisition. With a bit of luck, it looks as if this is a race we can win, and therefore avoid the kind of catastrophic situation that some countries found themselves in which doctors had to go into a triage mode, deciding who shall live and who shall be denied the use of ventilators.
But Dr. Elman, when we're talking specifically about the figures, I went through the figures earlier, and also the Director General of the Health Ministry in Israel stated a number a little over 2,500 ventilators. The Mossad was able to acquire about 30 to 50 of those ventilators. Those are not significant numbers when we're talking about the fact that only 150 to 200 ventilators are earmarked for the southern communities of Israel. It raises a lot of questions of what will happen the moment, God forbid,
the
something
question of
happens.
periphery in places like Eilat or Kiryat Shmona are real enough and could become critical. That's true. But we do get reports recently about a major breakthrough in acquisition. There are also various efforts being made to improvise, and Israel is, as I've called it before, a nation of MacGyvers, a nation of improvisers. And so hopefully the race can still be won in the conjunction of two efforts, the acquisition effort, which is gaining momentum, and the innovation effort, trying to basically improvise ventilators for this specific purpose. And at the same time, using the authority of the police rather successfully so far, and the moral authority of the government and the impact of social solidarity, which is also quite impressive so far, in order to flatten the curve just enough for the numbers to stay under the dotted line of how many ventilators are available, because this is the strategic factor in this, what can be described as this war with the coronavirus.
Superintendent Rosenfeld, I would like to ask you the next question pertaining to the cooperation between the police force as well as the Israeli military, the IDF. There's talk right now about the possibility that IDF troops will be deployed throughout Israel in order to assist police officers on the ground, not as an enforcement force, but rather as a support force to police. To what degree is the police coordinating right now and preparing for such a development? As we know, the military and the border police force usually cooperate together, but the factor of having civilian police officers rather than the paramilitary border police is a new development, is it not?
In terms of the Israeli police in general, we are making full preparations, if necessary, to work with other organizations, and I'm referring specifically to the IDF. That will be absolutely necessary if and when there is a government decision to go into a full lockdown stage, and that is in fact connected, of course, to the number of people that will be in serious to critical condition, where the hospitals will be in a situation where they won't be able to receive any more patients. and there won't be enough equipment. I don't think we are there at the moment, but of course it could take place over the next 24 to 48 hours, or maybe over the next 72 hours. It might not even take place, depending once again of what happens in the hospitals and the overall picture that the Israeli government has, the Ministry of Health, the Israeli police, Magen David Adom, and of course all the doctors and the efforts that they're putting into to try and save lives at the moment. We know how to work together closely with the IDF in every given situation, whether it's in connection with terrorism, whether it's in connection with public security. But the extensive measures that will take place, if they take place, that can be fully done and implemented with no problems whatsoever. It will be a boost of extra personnel mobilized, working together with the Israeli National Police, who are already, as it is, working from north to south across countries and communities and focusing on preventing the spread of the coronavirus as much as possible. But we're ready to implement any further decisions, as well as close down different neighborhoods, lock down different sites and areas, if necessary. Once again, being very careful with what I say, because only if absolutely necessary. But security assessments are ready to be implemented at any given time.
I'd like to follow up on a previous point. The Israeli police is making every effort to also, beyond come in touch with the local sectors throughout Israel. It is trying to educate a lot of communities that are not yet fully aware of the situation, maybe because of lack of exposure to television, like the ultra-Orthodox community. But I'd like to ask you, I've noticed myself a lot of helicopters flying around with loudspeakers trying to urge people not to get into certain areas together and try to disperse them and urge them to go to their homes. To what degree is the Israeli police using now more and more the advanced technological equipment that you have in your possession in order to reach and educate those communities that do not necessarily come in touch with the general Israeli public on a regular basis?
We've taken the use of technology one step further as well. Over the weekend, we were seeing that the majority of the public, more than 90%, understands the seriousness of the situation. If you're going to be out, there's a strong possibility that you will get infected with the virus. What took place is that we are now using drones. We are now using the police helicopters who are sweeping over different cities. We saw that over the weekend as well in public areas such as beaches and the coastline and the coastal region, in order to get the message out. That is taking place in general in full coordination on the ground. And also over the last day or two as well, we've had police helicopters and the drones that have special speakers that can get the message out to the public, to the people that are inside those closed specific neighborhoods that are, in fact, I would say, almost detached from what is going on the streets and almost detached from the real dangers that exist. And that's due to the fact that those neighborhoods are very closed, very claustrophobic even. They are, the people that live in those neighborhoods are not updated and online like we are 24/7. Everything that goes out we know immediately, and we want to stay one step ahead. But they don't have televisions, they don't have any mobile phones, and therefore we've been patrolling the streets on the ground with loudspeakers telling everybody to stay at home, get the message out, and also police helicopters and drones that are being implemented together with the ground units.
Indeed. Mr. Oren, I'd like to touch, as we don't have a lot of time left, the economic aspect of things. There have been almost 1 million people in Israel unemployed, beyond 23.7% of the entire country. Struggling during this situation. Of course, it's not different from other places around the world, but how is the government really able to deal with the situation? It's already talking about the need to rehabilitate the country with God's help after the situation is subdued. Tell us more about this angle.
So we spoke earlier about the tug of war between the health and defense ministries, but the real conflict is between the health ministry and treasury, because treasury sees the economic aspect much as you just reflected upon it. And there are suggestions coming from economists and bankers and other finance sector representatives that rather than try these lockdowns gradually, what one should do is lock down certain sectors of the population based on the concentration of infectious cases, and in 2 or 3 weeks, take out all of these locks from those sectors in society, those cities and villages where there is hardly any problem, and let them go back to work so that the economy can be reignited.
Dr. Lerman, would you like to input on this? About 1 minute left for you to speak about this.
Well, quite frankly, the entire world is sailing into uncharted territory, economically speaking. There's been nothing on that scale in terms of unemployment and economic decline since the crisis of 1929, and some would say this is even steeper, although it is clearly driven by the virus and by nothing else. So much of it theoretically should recover once the medical emergency is over. The key question here essentially is managing the financial system. It may require a rethinking about very fundamental things, like the Nixon shock in 1971 made us depart from the gold standard. We may need to depart from certain assumptions about budget deficits. If the orthodoxy on budget deficits actually kills families and destroys the livelihood of hundreds of thousands of people in Israel and hundreds of millions worldwide, then perhaps things that were central to the way we think about the economy for many years and for very good reasons may not be relevant for this recovery. So essentially, printing money and drawing on our resources in order to stabilize our situation in the transition period may require very dramatic decisions, which in turn would also require political cohesion among our leaders in a way that will enable them to take very tough, innovative, and courageous decisions.
Indeed. Well, unfortunately, this is all the time that we have for today, and hopefully we won't have to revisit this topic in the future, even though it doesn't seem likely. But I'd like to thank our guests from Central Israel, Dr. Eran Lerman, as well as Israeli police spokesperson Micky Rosenfeld here from the capital in Jerusalem. Thank you so very much for being with us. I'd like also to thank our TV7 analyst for being with us here today, as well as all of our viewers, and we will see you again next time.
You just watched TV7 Jerusalem Studio. We encourage you to pray for the challenges raised in today's program. If you were blessed by our production, please consider supporting TV7 Israel. The details of our respective bank accounts for donations from Europe and the United States appear on the screen. Your generosity allows us to continue to serve God's calling, to broadcast content that truly matters through TV7 Israel from Jerusalem.